Well, this is quite mortifying, but as a proper 17th century white Englishman, my desire to steal from lands and people unknown far outweighs my own survival instinct. Ooh, shiny. I claim this in the name of it. Uh-oh.
Earlier this year, I did a video on Darkwood where I said this: I think it can safely take its place in the pantheon of low-budget horror indie games with soul, like Betrayer or Pathologic. To my surprise, I was asked by multiple people, what the hell is Betrayer? Well, given the time of year, I thought it was a great opportunity to showcase this particular title. Betrayer is a supernatural colonial-era open-world FPS by Blackpowder Games, a studio made by former Monolith developers, which is quite some pedigree. The player character finds themselves off the coast of America after a shipwreck, with nobody to greet them but a girl in red who suffers from amnesia. Soon it becomes very clear that something deeply disturbing has tainted these colonial settlements, and it's all up to the player to figure out the mystery. It is a pretty good setup, not because it's an amazing story pitch, but rather because early colonial America with a supernatural twist is a woefully unexplored setting. The Witch, a New England folktale, is a movie that takes place around the same time as Betrayer, and it is one of my favorite horror movies released in the last few years. I think the combination of vehement mysticism plus isolated communities makes this setting ripe for an oppressive atmosphere. But before we go any further, we need to discuss the aesthetics. The more perceptive among you, aka not blind, have noticed that Betrayer is black and white combined with heavy saturation. It certainly is a special look, and gameplay was taken in consideration. The color red pops out to highlight gameplay elements like enemies or chests, and to focus the player's vision on certain objects. St. George's Cross looks particularly striking in this game. There is also a dark world inhabited by spirits, both friendly and not. Here the color scheme is inverted, with black being dominant over white. The black and white visuals fits perfectly with the theme, complementing the isolated atmosphere and almost fully diegetic soundtrack. It really does feel like you are the last person in the world as the wind rustles in these god-forsaken lands. Massive commendations for choosing a unique look that is filled with personality. There is just one problem though. My eyes hurt. It is important to note that this is an issue that can vary greatly from individual to individual. I know at least 2 people that have no issue with the game's look. Fortunately, the devs acknowledge this particular shortcoming, adding the ability to customize how colorful the world is, and oh my god, this game's pretty. Now that you can look at the world properly, it is clear a lot of work went into how everything looks, to the point that some might feel the black and white color filter hides the hard work of the artists who made these assets. Which begs the question, what is the best way to play Betrayer? Well, your personal bias and possibly even physiology will determine that. I encourage you to experiment. These are my settings if you want a starting point. Whatever you choose though, it is clear the art team did their job passionately. Now let's talk about the game's other elements. The only cutscene is at the beginning, featuring this eerie set of images which gradually morph from a skull into a female face while ominous percussion plays. It does a great job of setting the subdued tone and indicating the game's nature of peeling back the layers of the dead to find the truth of their lives. Quests in Betrayer are called investigations, and they revolve around communing with spirits to find out why they still haven't moved on, showing them evidence to trigger their memories. These investigations are the main way through which Betrayer captures that creepy colonial New England atmosphere. Small towns with dark secrets where everybody knows everyone else. Think Twin Peaks but 3.5 centuries earlier. Since this is a horror game, things can get pretty tense with murders, rapes and the like, but I do have to give praise since it doesn't feel edgy. Stories and motivations make sense at the end of the day. Sometimes bad people do bad things and sometimes good people do even worse things. It holds up, which is a damn miracle considering how terse the writing is. It's borderline functional at times. Combined with the reused asset models, no voice acting, and no real animation to speak of, and it's easy to see how things could have been much worse. Again, I think it has to do with the setting and its novelty. If this was rethemed with elves and orcs, or the colonial theme was more widespread, I think Betrayer would have had a much harder time selling itself. As it stands, slim pickings work in its favor. As for gameplay, in general it is functional. The gunplay has some interesting elements due to the time period. Every shot counts in Betrayer because of the slow reload time of the guns. Your rifle might be able to one-shot most enemies, but you don't have a guarantee that you'll get a chance to use it more than once a fight. Bows do offer some method of rapid fire, but their projectiles have drop-off and move in real time, meaning that targets must be led, on top of doing less damage than firearms. The developers made a very smart decision by making melee highly lethal so that when enemies rush you, it really puts the pressure on to make sure you don't miss. Betrayer is one of those rare FPS games that puts accuracy at the forefront, something that is lost when automatic weapons are available. Every shot counts, at least at the start. The difficulty unfortunately drops once you get the stronger bows and the crossbow, which have very manageable reload times, combined with a high damage output. It is easy to ignore firearms entirely once you reach this point, which is a damn shame, and why playing the game on the hardest difficulty will lead to the most enjoyable experience. It prolongs the early parts of the game when the enemies feel very threatening. There is also an inventory system along with a currency, but it is nothing to write home about. You have 3 weapon slots to fill as you desire and 3 charm slots which provide percentage modifications to health, speed, melee damage or reload times. These can be bought and sold at a merchant station operated by the off-screen character named John Howe. I guess the player character must be quite honorable given that they don't simply take these weapons while being in a life or death situation. Whatever, it is a game convention to have some form of progress. Pretty standard. Things are more interesting though when it comes to enemy variety. Demonic Spaniards and Ash natives look and feel great for the theme. Skeletons and giant spiders less so. This just screams placeholder, they are just too video gamey, especially the giant spiders. That being said, there aren't that many enemies to start with, so I can see why the need for some more, regardless of how cliché they are, or how well they fit with the theme. But even the weaker enemies are elevated by this game's strongest asset, the sound design. Even something as trite as a skeleton can sound threatening. This is top tier work. The soundscape Betrayer achieves is phenomenal, simply put. Whether it is the wind or the mysterious bell sounds in the dark world, the audio really works wonders when it comes to immersion. This excellent use of sound design also extends into the exploration. The player has the ability to listen, which gives audio cues towards the nearest objective. You can enable a visual cue as well, but I heavily recommend against it. Actually, disable the map markers and your position on the map as well. Just keep the compass. Getting lost is half the fun here, and the sound cues give more than enough feedback for direction. Treating this game as an Ubisoft open world checklist ruins it, so be sure to disable all of this. Probably my biggest gripe with gameplay is that investigations are not more developed. At its core, this is a game about going around each region, finding the spirits, finding evidence, showing said evidence, and then you're done. Rinse and repeat. Sometimes you have these totems that need to be cleansed through combat to proceed to the next region, but that's it. Beyond just the issue of repetition, I think some more interactive elements added to the mystery would have done wonders for the game. Whether through a dialogue system or some other feature, the game could have expanded upon the supernatural detective aspect, requiring some method to test the player, rather than just running around for evidence. As it stands, the gameplay of Betrayer is nothing special. It gets the job done, and again, I want to reiterate that the sound design elevates it to excellent at times. Finally, we have the story to discuss. In short, it is decent, and finding the finer details requires the player paying attention to many of the background elements. Rushing through the storyline won't get you the full answer. From here on there will be spoilers, so skip to this part of the video if you want to avoid them. Most of the game has no main quest to speak of. You travel from region to region interacting with ghosts, reading notes, and just generally being exposed to the world building, all the while fending off supernatural enemies and talking to the amnesiac girl in red. Things pick up in one of the later regions when you resolve the investigation of the governor named James Markley. He had twin daughters named Tabitha Markley and Alison Markley, the girl in red's true name. Tabitha got pregnant via a native with which the colonists are at war. This leads to James Markley killing his wife for concealing their daughter's pregnancy, then chasing Tabitha with his men. Eventually, he confronts her near the native village, burning her at the stake for willingly bearing the child of savages. Alison stumbles upon the still burning remains of her twin. Too late to do anything, but just in time to witness the curse being unleashed upon the land. Now the player has a clear goal: help Tabitha pass into the afterlife. To calm her down, every soul met up to this point needs to be judged. There is a hint that every condemned soul makes the final fight harder, but some people really don't deserve absolution. An interesting moral quandary aimed at the player rather than the player character. The confrontation with Tabitha follows, and afterwards she reveals she can't pass into the afterlife due to her sister. It's not her anguish that is keeping the curse alive, but rather Alison's inability to let go. In the end, we return to the site of the pyre to find the curse has been lifted. The girl in red having buried her sister, all that tragedy and horror being put behind as the twins come to accept that one of them is dead and the other one has to go on alone. All in all, a job well done. Hey, what's Alison apologizing for? Well, the game certainly lives up to its name, Betrayer. So while this twist will certainly confuse a great deal of players, there are hints spread throughout the game to indicate Alison is not what she seems. Strange things were afoot even before the curse, and certain notes reveal this. But the really important one is the note that says they saw Tabitha Markley dancing with dark spirits. Spooky, and it would make sense for her to be a witch since she is at the center of the curse. However, Tabitha says she isn't the one keeping the curse alive and Alison is her twin. Easy to mistake the two. What if the girl in red is the witch consorting with dark forces?
They played us like a damn fiddle!
Alison Markley needs someone neutral to help calm the spirits that are fueling the curse she created out of her sister's anguish. This recontextualizes the entire story. Her fortuitous appearance at key moments and the merchant that you never see but that leaves items for you to buy show that Alison was guiding the player character from the start. She feigns amnesia to hide her intentions, but her personality slips out from time to time. When you offer items or talk about one of the tragedies uncovered, she seems very shrewd and judgmental. Alison doesn't give the impression of being a nice person. Also note that almost every enemy incorporates red in their design as a way to signal danger. What was she wearing again? Furthermore, she speculates at one point that you shouldn't be alive and that's why you can talk to spirits. So what brought you back? Alison, her witchcraft revived you, possibly again and again. Dying simply respawns you. There is even the option for a soul-style recovery system, which further indicates that every death is canonical. Hell, it even contextualizes why the player character takes multiple bullet hits and heals fast. They aren't human anymore. Not fully. So what does the ending mean in that context? I think she releases the magic that is keeping the player character in their half-dead state. Whether they noticed the dark influence around Alison on their way to the afterlife or she fed their soul to the giant spirits remains unknown. Regardless, the land of the living is not theirs to inhabit anymore. I am sure someone else can come up with another theory, but that's the fun part when there is room for interpretation. Just one thing though, ignore the post-game dialogue. I had no idea about this when I first finished the game years ago, but you can find Alison in free roam after the credits. And she says, "Oh yeah, sorry, I guess I couldn't get over my sister, just give me a bit more time." This makes no sense, plus the dramatic structure of the story clearly indicates the game's supposed to end with a twist betrayal and then the credits roll. Apparently this conversation wasn't even in at launch, it was patched in later. It feels completely pointless and contradictory, so I personally just ignored this tidbit. So that's Betrayer by Blackpowder Games. You can probably tell I really liked it, but would I call it a great game? I am sure the devs were quite aware of the flaws I pointed out, but things like enemy variety requires extra resources that simply weren't there. Such is the case with many indie games. Instead, Betrayer excels at what indie games are supposed to be good at, offering different experiences from big budget games. I can say hand on heart that I've played shooters that most likely had 100 times the budget Betrayer had, but nothing to make them memorable. This game, on the other hand, might have glaring flaws, but its personality and uniqueness more than makes up for them. With that in mind, I hope this video did Betrayer justice, and hopefully convince you to give it a try, if you are in the mood for a Colonial era supernatural horror game. I don't think you will be disappointed.